So here we are at practice finally, and it is a really big bucket of work. I'm going to walk you through a little bit about just sources of capital and uses of capital, but that's a subset of everything. This is where your practice is going to include all your financial reporting and your duration and your yield. It's going to include all your technical assistance and how you're supporting your entrepreneurs. So it's a very big bucket. But for the purposes of the chaotic path, let me just give you the two core examples, right? So we're going to have, where does the capital come from? And then where is it going to? So the capital stack, this is your source of capital. And again, this is something that's going to emerge out of a lot of work. There's another module that Zach Neville Young led us through in fund modeling. So all that heavy duty work of modeling your fund, of estimating your loss rates, of estimating where you can get capital and how long it's going to take before you're going to be able to pay it back. All of that is in the fund modeling workbook. And then it comes down to this very simple slide on your sources of capital that say, okay, this is a $20 million fund, and we're going to have $1 million of community notes at the top of the capital stack. And in this case, it's a 5-year, 5% note. And if the community investors renew, they get a 5-year, 7% note. It shows you that renewal date. So that's the maturity date and the renewal date. The seniority position means it's at the top of the capital stack, meaning they are going to get paid back first. So we want to make sure there's the least amount of risk for those who can least afford to take the risk. So again, in laying the foundation for integrated capital module, we talked about that idea of redefining or relocating risk. This is another place where you're going to bump up against limiting beliefs, because the conventional belief in finance is that you should transmute risk into return. People who take the most risk should get the most return. The capital stack that you're looking at flips that upside down. The non-accredited investors, the community investors, take the least amount of risk because they're senior to everyone. Everybody else gets paid back after they get paid back, but they get the most amount of return financially. And again, that's because we're using this fund to redistribute some of the wealth and to relocate risk and return to where it's needed most, where we need to de-risk it most and where we need to accrue more return. They also have the lowest investment amount, so they can put in as little as $1,000 and up to $25,000. They are followed by the solidarity notes for accredited investors or wealthy investors. They have a 10-year 3% return. And there are anywhere from 10,000 up to 3 million. That 10,000 is pretty low for a fund like this. So we want to make this accessible. Some folks might be just barely accredited, and we want them to be able to get into the investment, into the fund. And they're followed by the philanthropic notes. That's a 10-year 1% note. It's junior to the solidarity notes. And again, that's 10,000 minimum to 3 million maximum. And those notes are followed by, in the small print, recoverable grants. So someone could make a $10,000 recoverable grant to us. If we're in a position to pay them back, we will. And if we're not, we won't. So that's how a recoverable grant works. There's other details in the capital stack that we don't need to get into in this module, but that's working out all of the specificity. Everything that's in here is going to show up in your term sheet to investors, in your offering memorandum, in all of your regulated security offerings. That's the source of capital. So the practice means you're going out and raising that. You're going out and working with all of the different sources of funding, whether that is foundations or impact investors or family offices and more, and community investors, of course, to go raise this capital. Then you've got to deploy it. So this is saying, hey, this is what we're aiming for. So when we go out to make investments, we're planning to invest 50% in small businesses, equity capital, 15% in small businesses, debt capital, and the remainder in real estate, 35%. So it's 65% going to small businesses and 35% going to real estate. There's all the different types of investment. We say equity, we don't mean just preferred equity. There's common equity, there's convertible notes, there's safes, et cetera. And if you use your integrated capital card deck, you'll know what those terms are, so I won't define them here. Same thing on debt. We're going to get into all the different types of debt. Debt that's secured, that means it has collateral, that that debt that isn't secured. There are going to be lines of credit, royalty and receivable financing. Royalties are sort of like a hybrid debt equity tool. A lot of these cross over into each other, but they have a primary structure. And you'll see a target number of investments and an investment size and a target return. So what's really important to notice is that this is what the fund has been designed to do, but then you have to get out into the real world and you're going to find things that don't fit exactly. And so if you you find too many super high risk early stage equity investments, right? You're going to have to sort of think about, what do we say no to, or how else do we rebalance our portfolio, because we've made promises to our investors about how we're going to pay them back. So it's a target that you're aiming for, but you're having to manage actively to it. The other piece I want to offer in this section, we talked about in the section on opportunity, having a pipeline of investable initiatives. So when you're talking about your investment mix and somebody's like, well, what are you going to invest in? It's critical to show them specifically, what do you mean? Whether you are already investing in them because you warehoused it, meaning you made an investment before launching the fund, or it's in your pipeline and it's something that you are looking at. You haven't decided whether or not, you haven't launched your fund yet, but this is the type of company that you'd like to invest in. It's absolutely essential that you give your prospective investor a sense of, what are we talking about here? So I want to introduce you to 3 in the small business and 1 in the real estate sector as examples. And they represent different types of investments. So first we have Chop Value, which is a startup. Chop Value Boston, and there's also a module on a site visit to Chop Value in this curriculum. And it's a circular economy that grabs used chopsticks out of the marketplace and makes beautiful products for them. And so this was a $50,000 structured equity investment. And this impact has a lot to do, if you go back to the investment criteria, we're saying it really focuses on that climate resilience piece by having a circular economy model, reducing waste. It really focuses on opportunity by hiring and training non-traditional job applicants, right? So people coming out of the criminal justice system, for example. And you have equitable ownership as well. So you might want to highlight a few of the impact criteria for each one. That's a startup. Here's a different business. This is an early stage worker-owned cooperative. You know, one of the things I love most about being an investor is that you get to learn all kinds of things about all kinds of sectors. I never knew that I was going to learn a lot about green burial, but this is a small worker-owned manufacturing co-op, and they make coffins that are eco-friendly and they're handcrafted. It's a BIPOC-led cooperative. So you have an enormous amount around ownership, around job opportunity, around worker power, and then the ecological climate resilience piece as well. And so they have a small successful business, they're early stage, and they need more growth. So they have a $100,000 term loan. Then we're getting to a later stage company, a growth company called Care Academy. We've been with Helen and her company from the beginning. We were in her first round of capital, and she is now really growing. She's raising a $20 million equity round. So this is a healthcare company that trains caregivers for home care agencies. And this has been just delightful to watch a company that was just getting started grow through different stages and get capital from us along the way. And in this case, it's a $500,000 convertible note as part of this larger round. So recognizing that in this $20 million fund, we're trying to show you examples of the different buckets of deployment that we're going to be using throughout the duration of the fund. We had a startup, we have early stage, we have a growth enterprise, you see different types of capital being deployed. And finally, we have one example of a real estate investment, which is a community-controlled real estate, East Boston Neighborhood Trust. We're going to be learning more about that in this program. And this is a MINT, a mixed income neighborhood trust. And it ended up being a $52 million deal that included many investors in the capital stack, including the city of Boston coming in. Boston Impact Initiative participated in $500,000 of subordinated debt, but really helped catalyze the capital stack, bringing all of the different stakeholders together. It's a wonderful story about many stakeholders investing together to accomplish this urgent task of getting 114 units of housing off the speculative market in East Boston. So when you design your fund, it's difficult if you only stay in the abstract. You really want to think about very specific initiatives, specific enterprises or real estate projects, people, leaders. That's what brings this work to life. Otherwise, it's an exercise in designing something that may or may not have a reality to it. So be sure that you're looking for very specific deals to invest in.